James Brown was born into slavery in Baltimore, but he had a very interesting and I would say somewhat unusual life as an enslaved person. When we think of slavery in Maryland and in the South, we have a picture of plantation labor, and in that area it would have been tobacco. But he resided in northern Maryland. So in northern Maryland, the economy was far more diversified, and that meant that enslavers, slave owners, put their slaves to a variety of tasks, and they had more physical mobility. And Baltimore in particular was a center in which there was a mixture of tightly enslaved people, people who were recently freed blacks, and then enslaved people who were negotiating with their owners and had contracts to be released. And James F. Brown seems to have been one of the latter, and still he escaped from that condition because his owner reneged on a promise to set him free. He went to New York, and according to family law, Verplanck law, he was hired by the Verplanck family for their New York City home on Wall Street. But he was discovered by a Southern guest, and that, of course, led to the negotiation by which the Verplancks helped him gain his freedom. Daniel Cromlin Verplanck, who was the Verplanck who negotiated with his former owner, Susan Williams, had a house here, Mount Gulian, where we are now seated, this beautiful place on the Hudson. And he became the master gardener here. In the Mount Gulian Gardens, James F. Brown was tasked with maintaining the gardens according to prevailing norms that were emerging. The Enlightenment was very much about introducing scientific methods in agriculture and breaking from traditional ways of growing foodstuffs. For a couple of reasons, that we were destroying the soil, this was not productive, but then also as political citizens after the revolution, that people who were leaders and who were very interested in the productivity of the country, and the country, even though there were those like Alexander Hamilton and others who envisioned a commercial future, the country was essentially agricultural. And so the idea of introducing scientific techniques that would improve the output of the soil and sustain the soil without erosion was very much at the forefront of their minds. And so he was engaged in that, I would say, by association. Well, I think one of the most fascinating things about the diary is that his life and his entries reveal the extent to which otherwise sort of empty phrases or descriptors of the antebellum period, like the era of the transportation revolution, or the expansion of American technology, all take on life, you know, because you see him enjoying these innovations and how they make a difference. One of the things that really captivated me was the fact that he moves around, and this is something that travelers from Europe always noted, because America was very much this novel thing in the antebellum period, and a lot of key travelogues were left by Europeans who come and they want to observe this new republic and who these people are. And they talk about how we're always on the move, we're rushing, we're speedy, we're a mobile people. And I got that sense just by reading the diary, because there are a remarkable number of entries in which he is just going. He takes a steamboat to New York, he comes back, he goes to Albany, he goes to up to Wappingers, he goes to Poughkeepsie, and not all of this is tied to work. He goes to Philadelphia. Um, he goes up to Albany. He goes up to Saratoga. He goes to Baltimore when his father dies. So, you know, these are lengthy trips. These are not like 2-hour trips, but he does them on a regular basis. So, um, you know, this idea of Americans being restless and moving are tested by this diary. I think the story of James F. Brown helps us to rethink what we mean by cultural landscape. The Hudson Valley has a reputation as a beautiful cultural landscape. And when people think of that, they tend to think of either the Hudson River Art School, Thomas Cole, and others. And they think of that, or they think of the rise of landscape architecture, because after Andrew Jackson Downing had an early career encouraging horticulture, you know, he produces his treatises, which become the manuals for landscape domestic architecture, which leading Americans follow and middle class Americans ape. So there, you know, we attract people by the historic sites we have. That's the meaning that we traditionally have given to this landscape, but it obfuscates, it just overlooks a whole history of other peoples who are here, certainly the indigenous people who were here, and the black people who were brought here against their will and their descendants, and the impact, literally the physical imprint that they made on the land, whether it was deforestation, as expressions of the will of their enslavers, or as horticulturalists, or as farm help, and I would say as enablers of the creation of that class. I mean, you would not have enleisured people unless you have the folks that do the work. So our whole understanding of this area of the Hudson Highlands as a cultural landscape needs to be expanded.